Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Brian, and it is officially done. Every single head coaching vacancy in the AFC North has been filled, which means that these teams and organizations can move on to the next phase of the offseason. But before we start scouting prospects or creating mock drafts, I want to give you guys my official grades for each of these teams' decisions at the head coaching position. And while I give you the grade, I also want to give you a little bit of an explanation as to why I chose that grade.
Once you get in a zone, it's kind of like you're in a zone, and there's nothing that can really phase you.
Just being in that zone.
You know he's in the zone. He's making checks.
I just felt like I was in the zone.
I was in the zone that night.
I was in the zone.
You definitely be in the zone.
Just in the zone.
I do feel like I'm in the zone right now, but I feel like we are in the zone.
The first team I want to discuss is the Cincinnati Bengals and their decision to keep Zac Taylor at the helm for the upcoming season. Now, personally, I grade this as a D. I do not like this keep. I don't like this decision. I semi-understand it. I don't fully understand it. And the only way I kind of understand it is the fact that maybe someone in the Bengals ownership or organization thinks that they can rekindle, or maybe that Taylor himself can find what he had in 2021 and hopefully reapply it in 2026. But honestly, I just don't agree with it. This is a guy who has had pretty much the same supporting cast and the same staff for the last 5 years and hasn't had success like he did back in 2021. There hasn't been any improvement on the offensive line or the defensive side of the ball, which has been major issues the last few years, last handful of years. There hasn't been a lot of improvement there. He hasn't seemed to have the control of the team necessarily, at least as the figurehead. He's more just kind of out there. Now, granted, he's dealt with injuries. You had Joe Burrow's injury this year, and I think Joe Burrow had an injury, it was either last year or the year before. Yes, that's hindered him. But at the same time, you really haven't had the winning success when Joe Burrow's on the field because the rest of your team, specifically your defense and your O-line, isn't helping out necessarily. You're putting up 34, 35 points, and you're still losing games because you haven't put in enough effort to at least getting the staff that can help build that defensive side of the ball up. You've put in the draft picks. You've put in the talent and the money somewhat to help improve that defense, but you really haven't put in the proper staff to help improve and to help unlock those young players like a Shamar Stewart or like a Cam Taylor-Britt or like anyone else over there like a DJ Turner or a Dax Hill. You haven't really found those staff members to help elevate those young players like many other organizations do if you look at the Steelers or the Ravens or anyone else in the league. So it's very tough for me to stand behind Zac Taylor and be like gung-ho, like I love it because he's the only and he's the most experienced. He's the only one left in that division, because I don't feel that way. I think he should have been the first one fired out of the 4 head coaches in the division, and now he's the only one left. But the only reason I won't put him at a D grade is the simple fact that you could do worse. As much as I'm saying how much I don't like Zac Taylor on the Bengals, you could very well have fired him and done much worse and brought in some really, really bad coach. I can't think of any on the top of my head right now. I mean, the closest one I can think of is like a Brian Callahan, just because Brian Callahan didn't really succeed with the Titans, and I don't know if he's going to succeed with the Bengals. But as far as going with Zac Taylor for the next year, you could do worse. There's got to be someone out there that could be worse. But you also had such a good opportunity to hire a young, promising candidate that could have elevated this team to a whole nother level, which is why I give this grade, or give this decision, a grade of a D. The second team I want to talk about is the Baltimore Ravens and their decision to hire Jesse Minter. Now, this one's going to be a little bit quicker because I already have a whole video up previously, I think it was the last video I uploaded, that discusses in more detail why I like this hire so much. But for this video, I'll go really quickly over why this is such a great hire and why I graded it an A. Now, Jesse Minter is a young defensive-minded head coach that came from LA and coached with Michigan and got his startup in the NFL with the Baltimore Ravens back in 2017. Again, more detail goes in my last video if you want to check it out on my page. But my main reason for giving this an A is because he is the perfect candidate that will come in as a young, hungry head coach that is defensive minded and can reestablish the fearsome Ravens defense that has been really missing for the last 3, 4, 5 years outside of that 2023 season. Having Minter come in, who wants to prove something, who obviously knows the organization as he coached here and started coaching here from 2017 to 2020. So he already knows the pillars and the expectations, which helps a organization skip a step of like, all right, this is what we're here, this is what we stand for. It helps skip that orientation process for the coach. So now you bring in a coach that knows the pillars, knows the expectations, knows what it is like to play or to coach as a Raven. And on top of that, he has the defensive mindset to help build and help improve your worst part of the entire team, which was the defense. I absolutely love the hire. I think it is perfect. I think it helps win now, and I think it helps win in the future as well, which is why I gave it an A grade. The third team I want to talk about is the Cleveland Browns and their hiring of Todd Monken, the former offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the first time I saw this hire, which is now about a week ago, I automatically gave him a grade of a D, and I was like, this is probably one of the worst hires you could choose, especially with the likings of Nate Scheelhaase, Anthony Lynn, and Jim Schwartz as your other candidates for the job. But about a week has gone by, and I've had the opportunity to not only ponder, but to think what Todd Monken can bring to this team. And I honestly love this hire. I have changed my grading from a D to a B for the main fact of what Todd Monken can bring to this team, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. Now, granted, I think Scheelhaase would have been the better option and the highest impact that you could bring, or the highest ceiling that you could bring, as he's only 35. He's an offensive genius, and I think he is able to bring in a whole new facet to this into the offense that the Browns had. But simply having that new offensive-minded coach who can innovate and who had led one of the best offenses in the league for the last few years, I really like that addition to a Browns team that has such a young, promising young, promising players and young, promising parts of that team. Now, the only real question I have with this organization, or at least with this hire, is how the defense will end up looking. Now, the defense is going to be good, and it's going to be at least medium, mediocre, because they're going to have Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward and all the young and really good stars and pieces on the defense. But the play calling will be up in the air because their DC will no longer be there. Originally, last year and before, their DC was Jim Schwartz, the former defensive coordinator. However, after being passed up for the head coaching job, Jim Schwartz apparently felt betrayed or snubbed and told the team that he will not be returning in the following year. So it's very interesting to see what Todd Monken does, who he brings in to help with the defensive side of the ball. But as far as coaching goes, as far as who they brought in, and as far as what I am excited to see, I think Todd Monken was their second best choice behind Nate Scheelhaase, which makes me excited to see what he can do, and is a main reason in why I graded the hiring of Todd Monken as a B. The final team I want to discuss is the Pittsburgh Steelers and their decision to hire Mike McCarthy to replace Mike Tomlin. Now, this move, in my opinion, is a C. That's what I graded it, because it just felt like a lateral move. It felt like you got rid of Mike Tomlin to try and get a whole new system, just to end up hiring a 9-year older version of Mike Tomlin. There's just no improvement that makes me really eager to watch the Steelers next year. And that's coming from a Ravens fan who already doesn't want to watch the Steelers. But when you had two finalists like Brian Flores and Anthony Weaver, I was really hoping, just for the sake of really good competition for the next foreseeable future, to see a coach, in my opinion, specifically Brian Flores, become that head coach for the Steelers to bring in the defense aspect, or that defensive mindset, into the organization that the Steelers are so heavily predicated and built on. And it's that defense ferociousness and fearsome, and that fear factor of the defense. So I was very kind of shocked to see them all of a sudden go way right, and pick Mike McCarthy. But according to Art Rooney, it was the right decision. he said that mainly the reason why they chose Mike McCarthy were for a few reasons. The first is that he is kind of a quarterback whisperer. You know, he worked with Aaron Rodgers, he worked with Dak Prescott. He knows kind of how to deal with those QBs. The second reason is that he's a veteran. He knows what he's doing, he has the experience, and he knows how to get a team and how to win a Super Bowl because he won one with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. Now, the third reason is that they didn't want to hire a young coach that would then, I guess in the eyes of Art Rooney, as he described, signify the Steelers going into a rebuilding mode because they believe their roster is ready to compete now. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all of those points. The main thing I have is I understand the quarterback one. All right, you have a young Will Howard, and maybe, just maybe, with the addition of Mike McCarthy, you can lure out Aaron Rodgers for one more chance at a run to a Super Bowl with the Steelers. So, okay, that makes sense. But as far as Super Bowl window and competing and veteran experience, I don't think you had to get Mike McCarthy in order to provide that for this team. The Steelers already were one of the older teams in the NFL, and the fact that their rookies alone had the lowest usage percentage of any team in the NFL. I think it was around 22 to 28% of all of their snaps were played by rookies. It was, I think, by far the lowest, or at least one of the lowest in the entire NFL. So you already had a very experienced veteran-like team that I don't think necessarily needs the veteranship of a really long head coach or really old head coach like Mike McCarthy. The second part of that is I think that they put too much emphasis on competing now. When in reality, if you look at a team like what the Ravens did in this, with a younger head coach that can still help them compete now, but also allows their window to be extended for a few more years outside of what their stars are currently. I think the Steelers, if they had gone with a Brian Flores or an Anthony Weaver, or if before the fact went with a Chris Shula, or maybe even if they got lucky enough to get a Nate Shieldhouse, if you had hired one of them, you would still be able to compete today, this coming season, but you also would have a very high chance and a very high extended window of being able to compete for the next 4, 5, 6, possibly even 7 years because your coach is young, innovative, hungry, and would be able to set a standard where you're not even worrying about him retiring due to age or retiring due to the lack of adaptation that he can bring being 63, 64 years old. So overall, I just don't necessarily like it, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's the worst hire because you don't know how Mike McCarthy will do. He did pretty well with the Packers. He did mediocre with the Cowboys, and now he's coming into a Steelers organization where if they wanted change, I don't think it's the best choice, but if they still want to stay consistent playoff hopefuls, I think it is the right choice, which really puts me at that average grade of a C. So that concludes all of my grades for every single AFC North head coaching decision this season. I hope you guys all enjoyed. I hope you guys got to learn a little bit, see kind of a little bit more insight into each head coaching decision. And I hope to see you guys next time on In the Zone.